Okay, so here we are talking the common topics. Conjecture, a big and important one. It's important to get a good grasp of that. The other two are probably a little bit easier and won't take nearly as long to talk about them. So degree, here we're talking about like the degree, the greater amount of importance, comparing to other specific examples in its field, things like that. Remember, it's built upon way back, if you remember, Horace's golden mean, and that's, Horace didn't invent it. We read that way back in 10th grade, and it was sort of common knowledge even by Horace's day. So Aristotle's, building upon, even for him, tradition of there is the desired, almost stoic sort of middle ground, and if there is the middle, there's got to be to the left and to the right, or if there's average, there's above average, there's below average, and that's just sort of how things work. And so you're not necessarily always aiming for the middle, certainly as far as effort. I'm hoping you're aiming for above average effort, certainly, but when you're talking about comparing and contrasting something to other things here, as far as a common topic, can you talk about anything in relation to other things of its field, as well as the merits of that thing, its extent, its influence, things like that, built in part on sort of some of the four, among others, some of the cardinal values and virtues of the classical world. Excuse me. The world of goodness and justice, honor, expediency. Is it profitable? Is it useful? Things like that. And obviously the opposites of those, goodness and badness, justice has injustice, honor, dishonor, and inexpediency, right? So, the degree, as you can see, to judge relationships between the opposite, that is your function, right? Where does my idea, where does this thing we're talking about, where does it fit in the realm from badness to goodness, injustice to justice? Where does this fit in contrast to, or comparison to other, similar ideas, similar actions, that sort of thing? Right, and there's also certainly a time element when you're trying to talk about something. Well, yeah, it's good now, better than others of its kind now, better, worse than it was before, or will be later. Certainly the world of sports is filled with all these kinds of things. This great player today is the best of all time. The people who played this same sport a long time ago, they wouldn't be, able to tie the shoes of this guy who's playing right now, that sort of thing. That sort of sports conversation of greater or lesser happens all the time. And you can certainly have that later on your own time. So that's a little bit about degree. There's, as you said, the golden mean. How does this rate in regards to the standard of its kind? Is this better? Is it below average? We just had to buy a new car, so we were looking all through consumer reports on what kind of this model, this car, is it below average of similar of its class, and the kinds of things we want in this kind of car. Does this model fit? Is it above average, below average, in used cars and things like that? And you can just sort of look through these slides as you see fit. It's pretty straightforward there. You don't need me to read every single member of this slide. Toward the middle there in the bottom, again, we talked a bit before about when you want to change something, you have to consider not just the thing itself, but how will it affect everybody? How will it affect small groups? How will it affect people we're not necessarily thinking about? Is this idea, is this change, is this topic, is it good? Is it more honorable? Is it more just for everybody? Especially if we institute it this way, or if we're looking at the future. If we make this change, will it be good for some people? Will it be good for some, bad for others? There's always that component about how many, as well as the innate qualities of something when you're talking about degree, especially when you talk about policy change. So something else to keep in mind. Is it good in itself? Is it intrinsically worthwhile? Is it intrinsically beautiful? What is it in compared to other options, and for how many people? And if it's innately good, you could probably assume that if this is such a great, wonderful idea, of course it'll be great for everybody. That might seem to be obviously the case, but it might not always be. So something to think about when you're talking about degree as a common topic, something when you're finding your arguments about why your perspective should be changed or adopted. And, in the past or in the future, things like that, right? So it's all about, when you're talking about degree, you're talking about questions of value, right? This option is greater, Maybe there's something that is not so great. Maybe there are even greater options that can't be enforced, or we're not at the point where we can do them yet. Maybe there's some lesser choices. Certainly my alternative, you would say, is even better than these weaker alternatives, so we want to avoid that sort of thing. You would certainly not necessarily use this notion of degree for all of your arguments, but you would probably want to think through it, certainly for some. Like you want to making sure that you've got the best ideas for your audience, whether it's on paper, in personal conversations, things like that. All right. And sometimes degree questions help you learn about your opinions on matters to a further extent, maybe even causing you to change your mind. You think about, well, yeah, this going back to that, vague sports example, yeah, this player is even better than, this other person or people right now. Then you look maybe at statistics in certain categories and realize, oh, well, statistically, maybe he's not so good at this or that or the other thing. And maybe I was just, wishing this guy was better than the others because I like the team more. Then you realize, oh, there's some other factors involved that make you think this area of degree is not what it really is. So, important things to keep in mind with degree. And then lastly, possibility. Conjecture, degree, possibility. When common topics you're talking about. With possibility, it's about change, right? Not just, is it possible that it existed? That's conjecture, really, but possibility for its existence to cause a change or something that could be changed in the past, or if change was possible in the past or change could be in the future, what circumstances could have instigated that change. Some people talk about the existence of alien landings in Roswell, New Mexico, but here in the degree, talking about possibility, like if that were true, would those circumstances have been possible to change the way we think about, other life forms, historical past, things like that? Was it possible what were the circumstances like for, the JFK assassination to be possible? Was it, could have these circumstances been different? Could have, could they affect the present right now differently? What were the, evolutionary perspectives for someone arguing for the evolution of different species? They have to think about, was it possible for, this version of proto-man to evolve into Homo sapiens? Was it, were the, atmospheric, genetic, all sorts of circumstances, was it possible for this evolutionary change to occur? And so that sounds like a lot of conjecture and guesswork. That's true, but when you're talking about change, you're talking about possibility, and there certainly are degrees of possibility as well. If you speculate if it was possible to change or impossible to change, that's certainly an important thing to talk about. Once you've established that it existed, could the circumstances have changed? Could things have been different? You're talking about possibility. And what could be possible in the future? It certainly relates to conjecture, but possibility is definitely one of those other factors about common topics when you talk about how can we make it better? What will the things that we do now make things better for people in the future? Will the situation still exist? Conjecture. How could it be better? How can we make it change into something more ideal? That is possibility. So a lot of overlap and a lot of similarity. And you might not, even if you don't, let me know if it's still a little bit unclear in your mind. If you need me to sort of, clarify those different categories again a little bit more specifically. But conjecture, does it exist? What is its nature? Degree compared to other things? Possibility, could it be changed? Can it be changed? Could it have been changed in the past? That sort of thing. Possibility is about change, improvement, things like that. So conjecture, does it exist? What is its nature? So yes, a lot of similarity. They're really, we've sort of talked about them as three different topics, but they're definitely very much intertwined, very much overlapping with stasis theory with one another. But that's really, how things work in real life. Just as we saw several times in English class, you can't always separate plot and characters and theme and setting and conflict. Sometimes they're all overlapping and you can't really have one without the other. It's very similar certainly to the common topics. Right? And so next we'll move on to the commonplaces. Another similar sort of idea, but perhaps a little bit more readily understandable.